And welcome back to Gaming with ADHD, where today on Topics and Tangents, we are going to be talking with Darrell Hayhurst of Pinnacle Entertainment Group, getting to know him and what he's been doing for Savage Worlds and for gaming in general. But before we get started, do make sure, hit that like button, hit the subscribe button if you are new here, and if you're interested, we've got social media links down below. And if you're interested in Savage Worlds, there is a link to DriveThruRPG. It is an affiliate link, does give a little bit back to the program, so we can get more content for you guys, or to review for you guys. But that's enough about me. Let's bring Darrell in and get started. Darrell, how are you doing today, sir?
Pretty good.
Good. Oh, man. So I, as we talked about before, I am a little bit of a disaster. So I do apologize to everyone today.
Making it look easy.
Exactly. Like, you can do this on, like 5 minutes of being awake. Trust me, it'll be fine. No problems here. So, all right. So, Darrell, there's been a lot of we'll say commotion in the role-playing industry recently.
Oh, we're gonna go there. Okay.
No. No, it is kind of fun because I'm always kind of amazed because for me personally, I didn't grow up with Dungeons and Dragons. I think like in 8th grade, I went to another kid's house to try and play Dungeons and Dragons, and like nothing happened. Like we just hung out.
I came to it late too, but I did come to it, right? Like when we actually started playing Champions, which was, out not almost a couple years behind, right? Nearly a contemporary, but we had tons of fun with it. Superheroes, very different kind of system. And in Champions, you got to build your own superhero with points. So you had a lot of choice. Mm-hmm. And then, my friends are like, oh, we should do Dungeons and Dragons too. And I initially didn't like it because I didn't have a choice, right? Like I rolled my dice and my guy kind of sucks, and that's just how it is. There's not anything that you can do about it. It's like, oh man, at least in Champions when I suck, it's because I chose to, right? And I get something for it. Like, oh, and I get more powers because of it. But so like that initial experience, it wasn't there. But later on, I did come to it and got it. Like, oh, this is what all the fuss is about. Okay, like now I understand. Part of it is the fun of like, I didn't get to choose. I just suck. What do you do with that? Like, here it is. Make it happen in your own way. Okay, all right, now I get it.
Sure. So let's go back a little bit further. So who is Darrell? I mean, I know I've met you a couple of times previously at our mutual friend Shane's house. Yes, I liked name drop. I know a guy in the industry.
Two guys now.
But who is Darrell? Where'd you grow up? Don't dox yourself, but tell us what you want us to know about Darrell.
Well, no, like I grew up in Tucson, Arizona, which is actually very near Phoenix, where Shane lives, which has been very convenient for me. Let me tell you.
I mean, there is the downside of Tucson, but we won't get into that.
So I love Tucson, right? Like I get it. Some people like can't wait to get out, but I'm a desert rat, right? Like I grew up here. I love the heat. Winter is bad. Like anytime I see snow or something like that, people are like, "Oh, it's snow. It's so great." I'm like, "You're mad. You're mad. You're insane. That stuff freezes you. Forget that." Right? So I actually like Tucson and the kind of laid back attitude in the Southwest, that we've got here. Is it perfect? No, but I am definitely a creature of this environment, and I've visited a lot of places that were very cool to visit, but nowhere that I would like to live as much as here.
So, well, just to kind of explain that, I grew up in Tempe, Arizona.
Okay,
so
yeah.
That's like, I have well, I like to call it a genetic aversion to Tucson, but
The whole Sun Devils Wildcats thing.
Yeah, pretty much,
Yeah.
But,
So like, for those that are not from Arizona, like those are the two college sports teams. University of Arizona is based in Tucson, and we've got the Wildcats. Arizona State University is in Tempe, and they've got the Sun Devils.
Yeah.
And Devils and Cats hate each other, and they're always rivals, blah, 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 blah.
Go Devils.
Yeah.
Anyway.
I could care less about the Wildcats. So, and that's because I went to the University of Arizona. So I earned my ambivalence.
There we go. All right. So I grew up in Tucson. So so you've stayed there your whole life. That's actually
like
cool.
I say, I've gone places and done things, but I always come back here and I just like it. Yeah.
All right. So then you mentioned that that you first started getting into so was Champions your first introduction to gaming?
That was my first role-playing game. Yeah.
Okay.
Like, we had like board games and whatever before that, but that was the first role-playing game. That was in middle school. So we all don't know what we're doing, but we're like, whatever, superheroes are cool. We're going to do this. And our group had like a shotgun blast of age ranges, right? Like some guys in college and some of us in middle school, but we all knew each other through Boy Scouts.
Okay.
So like we had that connection there. So you didn't have to worry about being like not cool enough to hang out with this group. So we're Boy Scouts. We're not cool anyway. It's okay. And then that's where I learned from kids who were older than me, like how it worked. And then from there, I was like, I like this. I want more. D&D initially wasn't for me, but you buy all sorts of other stuff to see what's out there and what you like. Like, ooh, this Space 1889 thing looks cool. This Torg thing looks cool. Like all of the games of the time, and you just keep buying Champions and playing that too. And GURPS was another like, oh, like this is cool, and it serves a very different kind of game than Champions did, right? And that was your introduction to, oh, there's all these different options, and not every game needs to be run the same way, with the same mechanics, and you could explore those different flavors. And that was also where I got started. We call it hacking now, right? Where it's like, oh, I like these parts of Champions and these parts of GURPS. Like I'm going to smash them together and make this game system that we play. And we called it DERPS. But like it gets your foot, like it gets you a little bit of experience in tinkering with things and seeing how it works. And I like knew by then in high school, like this is what I love to do. Like, I want to do this. And I tried to break in then, and I failed because I was not good enough to do it. One of my many attempts to start doing this for a living before I actually succeeded.
Okay. So, so when, all right. So you said you went to University of Arizona.
I did. Yeah.
Yeah. We'll forgive you for that. That's fine.
Yeah. Okay.
But so what'd you go to school for? I mean, did you go to school for writing or?
I did. Well, no, I was going to become a teacher.
Okay.
I was a certified teacher. By the time I left, I majored in English, minored in history, both of which strangely relevant to my current career. Like kind of accidentally went to school for what I do. Like unlike most people who go to school for one thing and then end up doing something completely different. This is completely different, but it's as relevant or more than it was to my teaching degree. And actually the education degree helps a lot too, because there's a lot of learning how to communicate, to explain, and the patience involved in that. And that translates, I think, pretty well to writing, too, and getting people into this, because that's what we want. We want to teach people and bring more people in. So again, strangely relevant for that. I lasted about 3 years as a teacher and said, wow, this is not for me. And then went into tech after that, which again ended up amazingly relevant to what I do now, because by the end of it, I had learned like knowledge-based management and project management, like, and all these things that have kind of boosted my skill set coming into this. Is like, oh, I mean, I am a writer, but I can also run a team. I can also, do a line's budget and organize the efforts around it and get things out on time, because it's way easier than doing it with software. Let me tell you.
It's a lot easier to release a book that just needs a line of errata as opposed to recompile all of the code.
And don't get me wrong, it's still hard, and you'll still see me fail like multiple times, right? Like, yep, that should have been out like 4 months ago. Sorry, but it is easier than it was. Just like when I was in tech, working with people on that, the joke was like, "Oh man, this is so hard," and I'm like, I used to do the same thing with 30 kids at a time. I only have to deal with one person for this. This is so much easier. Just adjusting that expectation.
Okay, that's awesome. So when did you decide that you wanted to make an attempt to actually let me back up a little bit.
Yeah.
So
from multiple, like I said, some of them ended badly.
Right. Well, this is called Topics and Tangents for a reason, because I'm going to get distracted and then have to backtrack or whatnot.
Cool.
So you
drive, I'm the passenger. I'll go where you want to go. Let's do this. Hit it.
You are always fun to talk to. Anyway, so you started playing Champions you said junior high. So
junior high, yep.
Have you pretty much played consistently since then? Did you end up taking breaks or?
So we all take breaks because life happens, right?
Sure.
We played pretty consistently with our group through college. And then after that, a lot of people move away and it's harder to find new people. And I actually went through a bit of a gaming drought from around college to around 30. What was really nice was, I met my now ex-wife. She was into it. And it's so much easier just having one other consistent person. It's like, okay, we got one. All right, I got another friend. Now we got two. Now we can get that critical mass and get a game going. And it was like our renaissance. We got to play a lot for about a decade while we were together. Then after that, it was a little tough again for a couple of years. But, some people moved back into town, like Tracy Sizemore, who you may have already interviewed or may in the future. She works with Pinnacle too. I mean, we grew up together. We were like grade school, before even Champions, right? But we both got into Champions at the same time. But she also had an interesting life path that went a lot of different places. When she finally moved back to Tucson, that makes it easier. It's like, oh, hey, you game.
I have a friend.
Let's game. That one extra person's all it takes. And then it starts to snowball and people come. And now, again, I'm in a golden age where we've got 2, sometimes 3 games during the week. And I can get away with that because it's my job. It's
right.
It's fine. It's fine to spend all this time doing this. It's research. Yeah. That's it.
We're gonna go off to the dungeon on Tuesday because play testing. Sure.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and some of it is legitimately play testing, and some of it you could make the case oh yeah, we're just checking out what the competition's doing, because we play everything. I prefer Savage Worlds. That's my favorite, but I play a lot of stuff because I like a lot of stuff. And it's cool. It's all good and it all helps, in the long run.
Right. So, all right. So you go to about age 30, but then when did you decide that you're going to make an attempt to break into the industry?
All right. So first attempt was at 18.
Oh, so you got
before college. I was like, all right, teacher was a backup plan. I wanted to do this. So I wrote a article for Pyramid Magazine.
Wow, that is going back.
It is, right? And it was actually in the last one that they printed before it went all online. And it was 1 cent a word. I think I made $7 or something like that. I still have the check because I framed out I made $7 in gaming. That's $7 more than most people, right? Yeah. It was I think it was like a GURPS write-up for Jiangxi, like hopping vampires, because I was super into Mr. Vampire and all that. And yeah, got accepted. And then I wrote another article and Pyramid was gone. And it was like, okay, and sent stuff out. And I didn't know how to get in, right? Like I Pyramid was there and it's like, hey, we're taking submissions. So I had that entrance, right?
Mm-hmm.
But there was nothing beyond that. So I didn't know what to do. Like I had the will and I was writing my own stuff, but like, what do you do with it? Like, I'm 18. I don't know how to publish. I don't know how to do anything. And thank God, because it's pretty terrible. And if I had published it, I'd be like, oh God, it's embarrassing now. Now it's like a cool piece that I can pull out of the garage. Like, wow, look at this old thing. Cool. Rather than see it on a shelf and be like, oh, yeah, I did not have an editor. No, that's pretty much me drawing the art. Whew, So, but yeah, like I made my $7 and I kind of like, all right, I'm giving myself the summer to see if I can get some kind of work or if this will pay. And if so, I'll do that. And if not, I'll do teaching as the backup. And yes, $7 was not enough to live on. So teaching it was. And teaching really wasn't that much more, honestly.
I mean, it was the 90s. $7 went a little farther.
Not far enough. So like that was attempt one, and right. But I would like go to conventions and I knew people. And at the time, he's in Germany now, but Phil Eklund was a designer that was local to Tucson. And I met him at a local game convention. And he's like more scientist than anything. And he would do kind of educational board games in a way. It was Insecta was his big game where you build these mutant bugs and you're trying to crawl out of a hive and eat the other bugs there. It's great. Really cool.
Amazing.
It was, right? It's a really cool game. Well, you can look that up, right? And he does these amazing science-based games, about everything from like evolution to space travel. And he is an honest to God rocket scientist. So like, it's not rocket science. Yeah, it is, right? And like, you've got all this stuff going on there. But I would do play testing for him in like write rules passes, and I even did some art, which is not my forte, but that's how desperate they were, right? And but through him, I got to know a small publishing group, Fat Messiah Games, Neil Selfke, and I pitched a game to them called Hard Vacuum, which was World War II space fighter combat. Which makes more sense than you might think, actually.
I was initially going to say like something like Traveler, and that went a direction I was not quite expecting.
Yeah, well, I mean, in the backstory is I was a big Babylon 5 fan, and I wrote the basic mechanics to try and do Star Furies, the way they move, because they have that inertial, heavily inertial momentum based thing, and like found a way to do that pretty elegantly. I think, in my opinion, I think it's a great game, right?
No bias.
Right, no bias. But the thing was, it's like, well, someone's already got a Babylon 5 license. And again, I'm not that old. I don't know how to do licensing. Like, I don't have the money for it. I can't do a Babylon 5 game. What else moves like that? Right. Mm-hmm. And it's like, well, rockets, just regular old rockets. And the more primitive we go, the better this feels, right? So we can do things like, you got radar, like visibility is a big problem here because we don't have computers or anything. You got a dude with a slide rule who's hoping. And when another guy uses his thrusters, like, aha, like I see light out there, like go that way. And so it was this kind of plotted movement thing. And though Fat Messiah mostly did the more scientific based stuff, well, they had a couple of Magic games and things like that.
Sure.
They took a chance on Hard Vacuum and they published it, and we did not lose much money, so that's something. But that was in the 2000 that came out, and that was attempt number 2 to break out. to break in. And the nice thing was, it's like, I got a game, and I didn't lose money, which is actually an accomplishment, especially pre-2000s gaming, right? Like I knew other people from conventions that could not say that, and the fun thing is, then it went fallow for a while because I was very busy with the tech jobs and making tech money, which is nice, right? And attempt 3 came because it's like, well, I've got some money, I can go to conventions again. I'm divorced, I've got the time to do it. Oh yeah, there it is. BoardGameGeek.com.
I was saying real quick. This actually, man, I've kind of gotten on this kick where I keep like looking at like really old games.
Yeah,
and
I've played it as recently as last year, and but one of my proudest things was I went to Genghis Khan, and someone I didn't know was running a hard vacuum table.
Oh.
And I sat down at the table, and they were like, hey, look, I just basically found this in a bargain bin. Like, I wanted to try it. And I'm like, yeah, let's try it. Let's see how it goes.
then you start arguing over rules.
No, I mean, look, man, you do you. But like, yeah, it came out pretty fast. Like, yeah, I actually wrote this game. Yeah. But we had a blast. Like, we all had fun doing it. It's like, yeah, it still holds up. It's pretty good. And it also had exploding dice. So like, yeah, I mean, there was when I played it with Shane, he was like, oh yeah, this is my kind of game. Like this, I was already kind of on that similar track, right? And it's fast and it's furious and it's fun. But I mean, you can see like the art on it, like that's just me with rendering software doing my best. It was not like it's professional enough for a like $10 saddle stitch book, right? But it could have been better.
No,
well, the piece on the back is actually that's I had an artist do that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, come on. There we go.
But the spaceships and stuff I did.
No, that's totally awesome. Wow, this is going a lot deeper than this is going to sound dumb, but it's going a lot deeper than I was expecting. This is,
Oh, the rabbit hole goes deep, right?
No, and that's fine. No, this is cool. This is why I spend like the first half of the interview talking to people about who they are.
Yeah.
Because again, like now my ADHD brain is like, I want to try this. This looks.
I know a guy. Turns out. I got the boxes of the ones that didn't sell just sitting in my garage.
We'll talk.
Yeah, right.
Don't get me wrong. Yeah, and quick, I was just flipping through, and it looks like somebody like made custom Battlestar Galactica.
Oh yeah,
for this.
So there were people like enough of them sold. There were little groups of people playing them, in England and other places. And because it had like a build system and you could do stuff with it, people went crazy with it, and they did some amazing things, with the system. It's fun, right? And it fits, right? Because originally it was designed with Babylon 5 and stuff like that in mind.
Oh, sure.
So I was all for people like, yep, run with it. Like, I'm not going to sue you. I'm like, who cares? But
Universal may, but
yeah, exactly, right? Yeah, like Universal might care and Fat Messiah might care, but I'm going to say, here's my notes, man. Like, go to town.
All right, so you did hard vacuum, which
I mean, it was doing okay. What killed us, really, like one of the things that killed us was Wizard's Attic was our distributor at the time, and anyone that's really old in gaming will know that name, right? And when they collapsed, like that wrecked us, right? We had all of like our stock there, and they were literally like, come get your stuff or it's just gonna rot. So
it's going in the bin.
Yeah, right. And so that hurt us. I mean, we sold most of our stock, which was good, but like I said, we didn't lose money. Or if we did lose money, poor Neil at Fat Messiah lost it, and it wasn't enough that he won't talk to me again. So, okay. But it was a lot of time and effort to break even. So I was like, yeah, I still can't make a living at this, back to tech hardcore. And that lasted until I got laid off again. Like I got laid off multiple times, but because tech, right?
Right. Yeah.
Like anyone that's been in tech is like, yeah, lay off. Semi-annual occurrence, But at the about 5 years ago, I was getting laid off. I've been going to conventions and getting to know people again, having fun, and had, contacted enough people and was interested in I'm going to use some of my spare time to write again. And the first one to give me a shot was Eloy Lasanta at Third Eye Games. And I wrote some stuff for Ninja Crusade 2nd edition for him. And that was my modern credit finally, and again, there's a big difference between having done nothing and having done something, even if it's something small. So it's I've got a little something and then a little bigger something and now a little bigger something that makes it easier to get more at that point. And then got some stuff for Gunmetal Games. Ron Blessing introduced me to them. So it started moving during that layoff period. And just like with high school, I was like, well, I want to give myself a 6-month block of time to make enough money to keep doing this. And if I don't, and I thought it was 95%, I won't, I'll have to go back to the real world, and get a regular job again, go back to tech or be a stalker at Target or something. Right.
Right.
I don't know, but it'll have to be something like that. But yeah, I did something and then did something else and I'm on time and they liked it. And then that led to Shane, because we played a couple of games at conventions or whatever. And I'd posted oh, hey, I'm doing stuff now. And he was like, well, try a one sheet. That was how you got into Pinnacle and still is, right? They got a program, one sheet, you do it 1,000 words. And if they like it, they'll call you back hey, maybe you can do more than 1,000 words here. And really the test is, can you do 1,000 words? Because most people can't. It's I'll write this, but it'll it's a 5,000 word, word salad. And you're all right, the instructions were
right.
like this. If you can't do that, you need to practice more. Yeah.
It is kind of funny that you mentioned that. So you say 1,000 words and again, this is gaming with ADHD.
Yeah.
So I try all sorts of different things. And one night I'm I want to write this story. And I started just writing and I hit 1,000 words and my brain just stopped. I'm I've got nothing else right now.
Perfect.
Right. So
you're hired.
Now I'm oh, maybe I should try this for Shane.
Yeah. Well, right. But the thing is you have to organize very specifically and very compactly to tell a complete game session story in 1,000 words. It's more challenging to do it in 1,000 than it is to do it in 2,000 or 5,000, right? And that's part of the exercise. Can you get over that bridge? And of course, and then the second part is he hands it back to me. From our teaching days, right? We called it it was, bloody, Yeah. So red pen, hacked and slashed, this was a bloody document, right? Every sentence has got something with it. And I take it and I fix it and I resubmit it. And it's that's the other thing is, can you take that kind of editing criticism? Will you just fix it and turn it around fast? Or will you throw a fit and be no, it's not for me? And okay, I got over that hump. And then the real magic turnaround, was he was at the time embroiled in working on Torg as well as Savage Worlds. And the reboot of Torg was taking a lot of time and effort at a time when he's got his own game company that he's got to run and doesn't have 100% to dedicate to that. And he just needed anyone that would be able to come in and help. And so we're talking, and he's like, I don't suppose you've ever played Torg. And I could say, yes, I have played Torg, which is not entirely uncommon. Like, it was a cool game and it came out in the 90s, but it's not one of like the ones that everyone's played. You know, it's not an evergreen like Dungeons and Dragons.
Right.
And so it was just like, wait, you have? Like, oh my God. And so we started working together on that. And really, we've got a similar enough style that we get along very well, but different enough that those conflicts generate creative new directions and solutions. Mm-hmm. So it was really great for both of us. And we got through the design, again, mostly Shane, right? Like, I'm helping. Like, I'm not nothing here, but this is Shane's baby, right? And he'll be mad at me. He's like, we both did it, man. I'm like, nah, man, it was really mostly you. But yeah, so we do that. And then he's got to go run Savage Worlds. Like, all right, I did what I needed to do for this game that I love. He loves Torg. That's where he got started, was writing Torg. And here's me like, well, okay, I mean, I helped write with him. I know the game. And I've got all these project management skills from my tech days. So like suddenly I'm just running this line, and we did fine with it on Kickstarter. And then when I moved on from Ulysses, again, layoffs, because the biz, right?
Right.
You know, Shane was like, wait, really? You got laid off? Yes, please. And I've been at Pinnacle ever since. And it's a great fit. I love it.
Oh, that's fantastic. So yeah, with I knew that you had been involved with Torg. Now, for those that don't know, what is Torg?
So
I'm a little familiar, but not that much.
Yeah, so like the elevator pitch for Torg is, so it's our Earth, but not quite our Earth. It's more like the Earth that action movies happen in. So like it looks the same, but there's like a little bit of an elevated like adventurousness and heroicness that happens here. But it's essentially our world. Now, what if, in addition to our world, there are these other worlds? And like one of those worlds has dungeons in it and dragons in it and magic and things like that. And another world has dinosaurs and like rugged cave people, but they don't have guns, right? Like it's you know, that kind of world. And another one has pulp superheroes like the Shadow, you know, and they're super villains.
Okay.
All these other worlds out there. And what our world has that they want is called possibility energy. And these worlds attack Earth. They land, and where they land, they kind of spread like a cancer, and they make the world into them. So the dinosaur land lands on America, and the whole East Coast is filled with dinosaurs, and guns stop working.
Okay.
And people, like regular people, as this new reality washes over them, they start to transform. So they like forget how the modern world works. They can't do things like that. They become more primitive, except certain heroes are called Storm Knights. And instead of being transformed by that energy, they absorb it and can use it. And it empowers them to become heroes. Maybe a hero using those, like, oh, I'm just going to become the most badass caveman like that ever exists. Like I'm Captain Caveman, right? With my pet dinosaur and whatever. Or I'm going to embody Earth. I'm this action hero with a machine gun and whatever. And these don't work here normally, but they do for me because I'm that guy.
Right.
And everywhere where these things are landing, that's happening, right? So your party is these Storm Knights from different places. So it's like, oh, you're Dungeons and Dragons wizard. You're a caveman, you know, with a club that can break a building, right? You're, you know, a cybernetic, you know, like basically cyberpunk, you know, you're a cyberpunk from the Catholic Church. And yeah. And you're a pulp hero, like down there. That's your group. And like you smash them all together and you go to these different realities. So it's basically like a different genre every game session. as you move around, and people from different genres, and those genres are your powers, and they fight. And you're trying to beat away the invaders and save regular Earth in the meantime.
And so how long did you get to work on Torg for?
It was about 5 years, I think. 4 or 5 years. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember Shane being very excited about the Kickstarter.
We were, because like whenever you do a Kickstarter, like you're like, I like this, I think this looks cool, but you don't know if anyone is out there, right? Like, because you can talk to people like, did you play Torg? No. Did you play Torg? No. Did you play Torg? Yes, it was the best. Like, okay, cool. You're our target audience, but we also need to get those other people to try it. And we don't know if it's going to work. So we were thrilled when it came out. And Marcus Plotz, who he owns Ulysses and bought the rights to Torg. Because I used to like to joke, the Weird Al bit, like, I liked the spatulas so much, I bought the company.
Yeah.
He liked Torg so much. Like, he had a choice, buy a car or buy the Torg IP. He bought the Torg IP.
Okay.
And built up a game company around that. And so he was thrilled that it did well, because it's like, they've got their whole other game in Germany, Dark Eye, that's their bread and butter. But seeing this like take off here and be successful was thrilling to him, because he loves it, just like Shane loves it, and I love it. So it's really cool that it found its audience, and it's still going even without me,
Good. All right. That's cool. I remember I picked up a used copy of the starter box for the original Torg.
Nice. So that's a good score, actually. Yeah.
I got rid of it at some point because I never did anything with it. But
well, that was the problem, right? We used to joke, right? Like what this really needed. Greg Gordon was one of the writers on it, and I had a tough time with it too at first, because it's so different from other games, right? Like,
right.
You're used to a certain thing, and this is just a different game. And like I pushed through it and managed to run it. Like, okay, and got me this job, so I'm glad I did. Right. But for most other people, it's like, oh, like someone like Greg has to run it for you. And then you go, oh,
I get it now.
I get it now. And one of the things that we were very purposeful about on the new one was we had the core book, but the book that comes with it's called Day One. And the idea on Day One is it walks you through all of these different invasions that are happening like on the first day. Your regular people that get caught up in it on day one and transform right then and there during the adventure. And we get to teach you, this is what the setting is. These are what make each of these different and distinct. But also we get to layer on the mechanics. So at the very beginning, it's like, okay, you're making simple rolls and you're doing this. And then the next adventure, it's like, oh, now we're going to add a dramatic task. And then the next adventure, this one's got a chase, and kind of ratchet it up to where by the end you're pretty familiar with everything and you can handle anything that we throw at you. And you've learned like, I don't need to read about these dimensions. I've experienced them. And I know when I build my own character, that was the one that I connected with. I want to play someone from the cyber fantasy.
Right. Yeah, no, and that's always one thing that is hard with especially role-playing games, is finding that introduction for the new player. Like, I know for me, like I would look at Dungeons and Dragons, like I said earlier, I never played it as a kid. And one of the things that was a hang up is I'd pick up the player's handbook, because you're like, oh, this is the intro. This is what somebody is supposed to know for the game. And it just says, okay, make a character.
Right. Yeah.
Oh, but why? Why would I do this? And there's no intro. So I like
it. And in the old box sets, there'd be a little adventure like that came with it, and there's magic mushrooms, and you're like, wow, okay, cool. We're doing mushrooms. Got it. And that was the difference between, like some starters and others, was if they had that box, they did have a starting point. Or like Keep on the Borderland, right? Which I think is a great introduction to the idea of Dungeons and Dragons. And once you go through it, you're like, oh, now I get it. And likewise, Savage Worlds, our plot points, I think, do a fantastic job of that, of just like, oh, this is what you do with this setting. It got to the point where, like, I won't buy a book that's just a book now, but if it's got a plot point or an adventure in it, okay, good, great. Now show me, what do you do with this?
Give me the game, the rules for how to play it, and then give me the quote unquote elevator pitch. How am I supposed to play this? What's the
exactly
the
that experience, right? Like, what set my expectation? What do I do? Dungeons and Dragons is very good. It's like, look, you're gonna go through a dungeon and you're gonna fight a dragon. It's in the name. Got it. Like, I understand that. Cool. Let's do this.
All right. So you get laid off from Ulysses. Now, are you still involved with them at all for doing Torg? Or
I mean, we're good friends. Like, I'll still talk with Marcus all the time. He's a great guy. I still talk with some of the people that I work with there. Like, I try to leave the Torg guys to do their own thing, because like, this is something I've found in my tech business, right? Is like, once you've done a thing, you can just saying things to someone that you think like, oh, this is just an offhand comment, like, becomes more than an offhand comment to them. So you've got to be careful. Like, oh man, like, feels like I'm telling them what to do, and I don't want to do that. Like, it's your baby now. Like, run with it. Even if I would do it a different way, like, who cares? That's the beauty of it, is all these different minds, like, moving it forward in different directions. So I do talk to them, but I try to be careful to not influence them, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I was asking more like, are you still involved in like writing, additional books? I don't know if they're still producing content for it.
They are still producing content. I haven't written anything for it in a while.
Okay.
The last one I did stuff for was the Tharcold. So I wanted to make sure I did something for that. And that just came out like a year or two ago.
Okay.
But yeah, their last couple they've done. I mean, they're great with, and I have, like I say, many friends that still do write for it, and I still read them. They're great. All
right. Very cool. So, so you get laid off, and again, well, it is kind of funny that you mentioned that, because my normal day job is in the tech industry, and literally yesterday they announced that they were doing layoffs. Now, it's 500 people worldwide, so luckily it's not a huge hit, and I think I'm safe. But
hey, fingers crossed for you,
right? Exactly.
But at a certain point, you get to be like, all right, it's not the end of the world. There's a lot of tech jobs. This is how it is.
Exactly. So it is just kind of funny that you keep mentioning different layoffs, and I'm like, okay, I think I'm still safe.
Yeah, sorry. No jinx. Yeah, no jinx.
That's fine. So had you already done work for Pinnacle before this, or was
Torg
the layoff the first intro into Pinnacle?
No. I'd been doing side projects with Shane and Pinnacle pretty much parallel with the Torg work. Like, I wrote a few things for Savage Rifts when it came out, and then I did one that I was super proud of, was a little 32-pager for 50 Fathoms, which was the setting that introduced me to Savage Worlds and changed the way I game. Like, it's an amazing setting, right? And Shane was like, I would love to do something new with it, like extend it in some way. So like, I gave my pitch, I wrote my 32-pager, and Cheyenne Wright, who is the amazing illustrator that did the original, comes back and does the illustrations for this. So it all looks exactly like, from the 50 Fathoms book, and it all fits in. And like, to me, that's like my Star Wars, right? That's like all the people that do special effects. I'm like, oh, and then I got to work on Star Wars. Oh my God. Like, for me, for gaming, 50 Fathoms, like, this literally changed the way I think about gaming and the way I write. So getting to contribute to that was a big thing for me. It was like, oh, this is really cool. And I'd done a bunch of little things along on the side like that. And so it was not, and Shane and I are friends. Like we'd been spent years in this same period, pretty much just playing, bouncing ideas back and forth. So when I did free up, like it wasn't a shock that I would come to Pinnacle,
Okay. So
certainly softens the blow, when you get laid off, when you've already kind of got plan B, like right there. And that's where I kind of wanted to be anyway, because it is such a good fit.
Okay, so that actually brings up a question I want to ask. So you mentioned 50 Fathoms, which
yes,
I'll be honest, I have not looked into that one.
That's fine. Most people haven't, and it's not swayed, right? Like it's for the previous edition. There's a conversion sheet, but that's kind of a barrier to people, which hopefully we'll be able to fix. Knock on wood, right?
Well, you said that changed your approach to gaming.
It did.
So my understanding is, well, just off the top of my head, I believe 50 Fathoms is kind of like a pirate setting, correct?
It is. It's pirates and magic in another world. Yeah.
Okay. Why did that change your outlook on gaming?
Yeah. So the big thing was, for most of my GMing before that, I was using the champions model, which is, and there's nothing wrong with this, right? I love it. You need about an hour of mystery or filler or something to set the stakes, and then the fight starts, and then the rest of your night is one big fight.
Okay.
Yeah, like that's it, right? We set it up. Okay, big champions battle, bam. That's how I would write. That's how I would run. And the notion of a sandbox where you didn't necessarily know what was going to happen next, where you'd have to like, others, not just random encounters or whatever, but literally like, well, here's a map. There's these, different islands. Your boat is right here. Where do you want to go? And what do you want to do when you get there? That kind of gaming, that open sandbox style, was terrifying to me. Like the idea of not being able to plan the adventure ahead of time. And that was the Evernight came out before it, and it was called it's a plot point, but it didn't have quite the same style as 50 Fathoms did. And 50 Fathoms was essentially the first of our modern plot points, where you've got these big story beat chapters, and you can connect to them in different ways. It's pretty much like, I don't know, you're going to get to this island. When you do, this triggers and something happens. And by the end of it, you've wrapped up this chapter. The next chapter might trigger next episode. It might not. It depends on when you get here. And then there's these things called Savage Tales, which are shorter adventures that, again, trigger when you go different places or do different things. Or you're just like, I'm bored. I'm going to trigger this one. This happens. A pirate attacks. Ta-da! It's Redbeard. He's on fire. What's happening? And you go through this whole, Redbeard sub-adventure. And by the end of it, and each of those would have little clues that would point to the other Savage Tales or the next chapters in the plot point. So always the gravity of it would pull you along, but you'd get there in different ways. It's the only campaign I've run multiple different times to see the different variations of how people will approach it. Not true. I've run Necessary Evil, which is another superhero plot point. I've run that multiple times too. But plot points, you can do that because they might play out in really different ways. And that was just a different approach to it. And the other thing that I loved about 50 Fathoms in particular is you've got this meta story that the plot point is telling, which is you're in this world, right? And the idea is it is another world, and they've got their own, species and magic and blah, blah, blah. But ships that have been lost on Earth at sea wash up here. So you can be a human, and there are also if a pirate went missing, they're here, right? You're going to meet them. That's a thing, right? And so there's a mixture of that familiar and that alien, and there is a very specific monstrous thing causing this to happen, and it's also flooding the world. It is already sunk beneath 50 fathoms of water, and the water level is rising. And it's rising slowly, so it's not like, all right, we don't have time to do a side quest because we're all going to drown if we don't. It's more like, okay, if we let this go for too long, it's going to be a problem, but it is driving us forward. We've got a purpose. We do need to save the world, but we've got time to do it in our own pace, in our own way. I'd never played anything like, I think a lot of Pathfinder fans found this same kind of structure in Kingmaker. I think Kingmaker proved to them that it could be done and reproduced, but for me, it was plot points that did it.
Okay.
And after that, I was like, oh man, this is a better way to write an adventure than a pre-scripted set of encounters and a graph, you know.
Okay. So so you've mentioned this a few times, and especially for those that aren't familiar with Savage Worlds.
Yeah.
What's a plot point campaign?
Yeah. And again, so they try to give you enough of a skeleton, you know, that you can hang your meat on, and you're like, here's some meat. But there's a lot of leeway in terms of how you're going to approach it. You know, it's like, look, here's the place, here's the people in it, here's what they want to do. Okay, now it's on you. Right? Like, you know, and like those are and there are these major beats like that will together string together to form this like epic story with a beginning, middle, and end. And then the Savage Tales are like these kind of side quests, right? They could fit in, you could blow them off, like that's fine either way. It's a very flexible way of running. But and the other thing is like an adventure path, like it's got a progression and an ending. So you get that very satisfying, oh, we have reached a climax, we have saved the world. That's awesome. Like, okay. We finished, we close the book, and I'll probably run 50 fathoms again, right?
Sure.
But it was it's done. Like I did it. It's cool, right? That's plot points in the roughest sense, right?
Okay. So then all right, so then you've been working for Pinnacle. You said you've done work on Savage Rifts. I actually have that one.
Nice.
I've got a few Pinnacle things.
Yeah, I mean, and it was minor work on that. Like I did one of the adventures. I brought back it was an adventure with a fake ZX6 hive.
Okay.
And one where you got to rescue dog boys, you know, from the pound, because I love dog boys. And I thought ZX6 were the best villains in Rifts. So I was like, okay, this is what I want to contribute to it. Everything else is like Sean and Ross and Sean, like there's two Seans,
right?
Like those guys carried the weight. I did a couple things for it. Like those are my little minor, additions.
Right. And so then I think this is a great spot to transition over to something new.
Yeah.
Coming from Pinnacle. So let's see. Trying to figure out how I want to organize this screen. All right. So a couple of weeks ago, Pinnacle decided to launch a new Kickstarter for the Legend of Ghost Mountain.
Legend of Ghost Mountain. Yes.
What is this?
It's our supernatural martial arts mayhem setting. So the story of Ghost Mountain is like your heroes are called ghost wardens, and this is a mystic realm, very fantasy, very Eastern flavored, even though it's not a specific historical setting, right? It's a fantasy setting. But all of the tropes that you would expect from Wuxia are in effect and being leaned into heavily. But the basic story is there is a gateway to hell, and when you die, your ghost is supposed to go through it, kind of get judged. If you've been bad, and everyone's been bad, you'll get your punishment. And then after you've been punished in hell, you get reborn and renewed and try again. Like it's not a bad thing. It's just that's how you get rid of the sin that you accumulate, during your life. That's how it's supposed to work. Just like human beings don't always do what they're told, even once they're dead, sometimes they can get a little bit unruly and not do what they're supposed to do. They can resist the pull of this gate. And this is where ghosts and hauntings come from. And it's not just your soul that can do this. The body is like a separate thing, and bodies can be unhappy too if they've been treated particularly badly. And they'll get up and try to eat people or, kind of like cause mayhem. Mm-hmm. So the ghost wardens, they are the caretakers of this gate. And it's their job when the undead are acting up to go resolve the situation. And sometimes they can talk them down like, hey, like, I get it. Your death was unjust. Like, maybe we can do something to help justice prevail and you can peacefully go through the gate. Or, wow, that's just an evil ghost. We need to beat it up and send it through the gate, right? Like, it can go either way.
You're not going to walk through? Fine.
Oh, exactly. I will walk you through. Yeah. So, like, that's Ghost Wardens. That's their job in a nutshell. And in the plot point campaign, the idea is something very unusual and very big has happened, where rather than scattered incidents of this, there is an entire army of undead bodies and ghosts called the Inevitable Army that has risen up and are just trying to wreck the entire empire. And the Ghost Wardens have to figure out why this is happening, gather their own forces to hold those guys off, and then eventually go into hell itself to try and solve this problem and save the world.
Okay. So where did the idea of Ghost Mountain come from?
So this is Shane's brainchild, right? And it came to him, and he's the first to say it, watching Kung Fu Panda. Right? And I think for a lot of people, I like to say, Kung Fu Panda is legit, right?
It's a great movie.
Well, not just that, and I think it does a very good job of codifying a lot of the things that you see in the deeper wuxia genre. Like, it understands it, right? And can communicate it to a new audience. So, it actually works damn well on that level, right? So that inspired him, and the way Shane does settings, and you've seen it in Deadlands, and we've seen it in other ones, is he's got a great way of, he doesn't do a genre, he does an adventure, right? It's this might be the setting and the trapping or whatever, but there's a story here. And this story is the Inevitable Army, the Ghost Warden struggling against this. It's not, it's kind of wuxia. It's no. It's the Ghost Wardens with this problem. How do they solve it? Like Deadlands. Yes, it's the Weird West, but really it's a story about the Reckoners, and the people working for them to ruin the world and turn it into a Deadland, And it's great to adventure in those because he makes it very clear this is what heroes do, right? You've got a job to do, and like in 50 Fathoms, you can take side quests and they'll help you, but you've got a purpose, right? And that is something to latch on to in gaming. And like I said, that's what he brings to it. And like I say, when I started trying to do this in 1990, I wrote an article about hopping vampires for Pyramid Magazine to give you an idea of how long I've been into that genre. I watch the movies, I watch the TV shows, I read the books about the books, I do the scholarly thing, I read the real history and the folklore, all of that. I've just been soaking in it for 30 years, and I didn't even know about this project. It was an acorn, in his mind, and he commissioned a cover, and it was here's the idea, but he hasn't done anything with it yet because he's busy, right? He's got all these different games. I'm me, and I'm talking about the stuff that I'm into, and he's like, boy, have we got a fit here.
So because I'm not that familiar, what do you mean by the wuxia genre?
So for most people, there's a couple of different points where you can be introduced to it. I think the most common, here in North America, is Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon,
Okay.
A lot of people have either seen it or at least heard of it. And like it again, it does a very good job of kind of codifying the themes that you see of the wandering swordsman who like they stand apart from the like the government and the society, and they've through training unlocked incredible abilities, and they've got to decide in their own individual way how to be righteous, right? Like how to do the right thing with the skills that they have learned. Like that's one interpretation of like the core of the genre, right? A lot of us got into it with a wave of Hong Kong movies that came out in the 90s. Like, Jackie Chan would be the entrance to that for a lot of people. He's very, he brought it here. Stephen Chow after that, like a lot of people have seen Kung Fu Hustle, which is one of those fantastic movies. Like Scream is both a great horror movie and a great parody of horror movies. Kung Fu Hustle is both a great wuxia movie and a great parody of wuxia movies, like simultaneously, right? And once then you get a little deeper, and there's a lot of these TV shows, 40 episodes, and some of them are on Netflix or on, Amazon Prime and all that. And then you're like, oh, this is the same story based on the same novel that a movie that I liked was, but now it's 40 hours long. It's like, yes, this is the best version of this movie I've ever seen because it's 40 hours long now, right? And then you get to the books themselves and you're like, oh my God, this is even better. So it goes deep, right?
Okay. So Shane hears you talking about all the wuxia stuff and says, okay,
he's like, yep, like, I think you might be the guy to bring this. And it's like, it's not just that I know that genre, it's that I know plot points and Savage Worlds and how that works and how to marry those elements and try to bring out both. Because like it's easy to mess up the structure of a plot point. I've done it.
So as I was doing some research on this, so the Kickstarter got announced and I started watching and I saw that I've been watching the videos. I do kind of want to talk about some of the things that they bring up. But then I also noticed that there's actually like this isn't the first time you guys have tried to bring this to market.
We tried it before, right? So we did so we've got two venues that we bring out for crowdfunding, right? We've got Kickstarter because Kickstarter's got like that big audience.
It's got the name.
It's got the name and it's got the reach, right? But then we've also on our own website, we've got what are called game changers. And those tend to be smaller projects, but not always, right? Where we're like, hey, look, we can't run another Kickstarter, but we're doing this. Like, we're doing this anyway. Do you want to join us for it? And like all the companions, like Superpowers Companion, Fantasy Companion, like those have been there, and draw that audience, and people have come for them. Thank God, thank goodness, right? And our initial thought was like, cool, like let's put it here, like let's get it out there. And we had a very specifically crafted like way we wanted to market it, which turned out to be a terrible idea. like, there's a lot of different people that'll try to take the blame for that, but like we all decided like, oh yeah, like let's do this, like this is going to be great. And what was interesting was like what we tried to push it as was where the thinking was we're going to call this a Savage Saga, and it's going to be like a plot point with a little extra was what we were thinking. But unfortunately, like kind of how it ended up was people were like, a saga, well, that's not a plot point. I love plot points, and I get that, right? Like a lot of products, if it wasn't a plot point, I wouldn't buy it, right? And so they're like, it's not a plot point, then I don't want it. And we're like, oh man. And then the other thing, we were like, okay, so cool, for a game changer, we can be very specific on this. We're just going to do like the box with the stuff that we think people want in it, and just keep it no analysis paralysis, just box, nothing. Okay. And unfortunately, a lot of people are like, man, I really just want the book. Or I am from Europe and I cannot afford the exorbitant shipping fees to get a box. Can I just get a PDF? And in our mind, we're thinking, well, yeah, you can just get the PDF because after the game changer, it's just available. Like,
right.
That's cool. Like you're covered. But what we didn't account for was that social element of it is people want to feel like they're participating. Right? When you do like something like that, it's like, well, no, I wanted to be a part of Ghost Mountain. I'm not allowed to be a part of Ghost Mountain, and that doesn't feel good.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so we're like, okay. We've made some mistakes here. Like let's just stop and let's regroup. And that gave us more time to add even more material to it. It's like, all right, people thought it didn't have enough. Let's add even more. So like everyone's going to be happy like when it comes out. Like, all right, cool. We'll add some adventure generators. Like this thing's going to have legs. It's going to have, be more than just the plot point. There's going to be a lot to it. And let's give them the option, just the book. That's fine. We get it. You don't want the whole box. Neat. We want to sell to you. Hey, just a PDF for our European friends or people that are shipping averse. Great, you can be part of this. Like we want you to be here and part of this. And what do you know? Like that went way better. So, and like with Torg, like you put it out there and you hope people will find it and come and like the look of it and what you're putting out there. And yeah, thank goodness, like that's been the case this time. Where they came like, oh, thank you for coming, everyone. Please,
Okay. So then originally, I guess it was just a plot point campaign. So
yeah, it was
like
plot point,
30 pages or so.
Well. So when this was first pitched to me, the idea was just I'd done the 32-page 50 Fathoms, Fire and Earth thing. And we're like, oh, well, let's do that as an introductory starter to this setting, just so we can get something for the setting out there in front of people, because it's one of those settings. Like I think it works better once you just play it. Like when I've run it for people, they're like, oh, okay. Like I don't know what Wuxia is, but I do know what this is. I know what to do with this. This is fun and this is inviting. It's like trying to communicate that can be difficult. So the thought was like, well, 32 pages, and it's essentially like the first couple chapters of an overarching adventure. Let's get it out there, and then we'll do another 32 and another 32, and eventually bundle it all together. And there was little character creation, like here, like we're gonna come with 5 wardens, but and it's kind of meant to play with them originally. But here's also options if you want to make your own, and you can just insert them instead. Fine. Yes, there's our 5 iconics. Yeah. And that was the original idea, and we did it, and we finished it, and I actually finished it quite years ago. And we played it, and everybody really loved it. And we're like, this needs to be more than a flimsy 32-page thing. Let's bump it up to a book, 96 pages. I'm like, okay, I can finish the plot point and Savage Tales in 96 pages. Let's do it. Right. So we did that. And then we're like, okay, let's add a little more to it. And when we did the Game Changer, it was 128 by that point. And it had more character creation and more like the saga hooks. Like, okay, here's how to hook these characters into these storylines as you go. So we can tell this, like everyone's got their own arc that can get a satisfying completion as part of the overarching plot point. And then when we went to the newest iteration, we're like, okay. You got 60 more pages. Let's make it 196, and we'll add adventure generators and even more character options and more advice on, all right, we're just going to assume you're playing your own guy rather than ours. Here's how to make these same hooks work for them.
Okay. And so beyond just the Wuxia setting, why should somebody get into Legend of Ghost Mountain?
Yeah, so martial arts and ghosts, come on. like that's my base pitch. It's martial arts and ghosts. And then the more refined take on that is, and this was again like Shane's brainchild, was the martial arts in this, rather than being based on animal kung fu styles, is based on emotions.
Okay.
And the idea is when the dead do rebel, it's because a strong emotion is driving them. There's overwhelming sadness that's preventing them from moving on. Or they're kind of like a Joker type that's just gone crazy and is cackling and, is just, chaos and messing with things. Or they're afraid to move on, or they like scaring other people, right? Like if there's a positive side and a negative side to each of those emotions. And then what really fit was like, okay, we're going to make the Ghost Wardens martial arts and powers come from that same source as the creatures that they're fighting. So, one of them is using fear emotion for her kung fu, and she will have things like fearful step, which lets her back way off, from an enemy. And these are all styles that are seen in movies and books like already. Anger will let the the rat chopper do extra damage. Or if you play Savage Worlds, there's a setting rule that's usually default called 4 wound cap, which when you do enough damage to do 4 wounds, you just stop. And if someone manages to soak some of those wounds, they will be able to survive. Anger lets you use your kung fu to go blow past that wound cap. So if you get this really awesome damage roll and do like 8 wounds, you're like, yep, I'm using my anger and this is happening. You got to soak all 8 of those and you're done for. So like it gave us a lot of space to play with different variations of here's how this kung fu is going to be different, style to style to style to style. And then here's all these edges that would work in this, but will also work in a regular martial arts campaign, or can be imported into Deadlands, or anywhere else, as long as your GM is like, yep, it's cool. They're all weird edges. So weird edges, you kind of got to check before you take them. But as long as it fits with the game world, you'll be able to add that kind of higher level martial arts to your game too. So
okay. So so you're mentioning martial arts. Now, let's be honest, this is a role-playing game.
Oh yeah.
And
yeah.
So we're not necessarily we'll say actual martial arts masters.
Sure. Yeah.
How do you translate the martial arts into a role-playing game?
Yeah. Well, and this is one of the other things why the emotions were such like a choice, right? Is because it's easier to role play and get mileage out of it, right? And we give some examples like, hey, look, pretty much you're just going to name your moves. Like, oh, if I'm using sorrow and I'm an unarmed fighter, call it your sorrowful palm or something like that. And then after that, the maneuvers from Savage Worlds kind of take care of most of it. And what that doesn't cover is covered by your edges. You'll have a specific edge that's like, okay, I've got unyielding skin, for example. And I don't have to have seen like the martial arts movies or the real martial artists that practice this style to understand that it makes it so that when I like stand to tank a blow, I'm really good at it. And in game terms, it's use your full action to defend, which is an option in regular Savage Worlds. If you do that, you can soak damage for free. You're rolling your vigor and someone does a couple wounds to you and you're like, whatever, I roll it, bam, I bounce it, right? And that feels like that Qigong style of like, I'm just going to tank this. Blades are going to bounce off my skin. I've got, and if you've seen the movie, you can call it 13 Warrior Golden Bell Protection and your friends can know what that is and laugh. If you haven't seen it, you can be like, I've got unyielding skin and it still works, right?
So for those, because my channel, I cover all sorts of games. So for those that haven't played Savage Worlds, what are edges?
Yeah, so edges are one of the ways that you differentiate characters, right? Everyone's got traits, which go from D4 to D12, sometimes even higher, with bonuses. which are what you roll to do things. And each trait is based on something you do, right? It's action based. Like, I'm going to try and persuade someone. What would I roll for that? Persuade. Like, okay. There you go. Like, I want to intimidate him. What would I do with that? Intimidate. Hey, like it's supposed to be very kind of logical in that way. Those are the dice that you roll. But beyond the dice, just having a better roll than someone else at one of these traits, you have edges and you have hindrances. And they're what help. Like, okay, maybe we've both got fighting D8, but you've got fighting D8 and first strike, which means if someone comes within range, you smack them.
Okay.
I've got fighting D8 and counter strike, which means if someone swings at me and misses, I smack them.
Okay.
Those are two completely different fighting styles, right? And you can make up the trappings of what that is. Like that first strike guy, like it might be serpent based or joy based or whatever, but he's a quicker fighter. Whereas the counter attack guy is going to be a more probably thoughtful, probably more planning, on the field. And these edges go far beyond combat. You can do tests with them. You can taunt people. Like you can distract them with them. You can, be famous. Like everyone's heard of you. Like, I heard you were dead or whatever, right? Like they open up all these possibilities to give the characters a lot of flavor. And between the Suede core book, which you need for this, and the book itself, like here's these options. And literally every one of them suggests a character to you. Like, I could build a guy around this. And then hindrances are the other thing that help you distinguish your characters, and they're your flaws and weaknesses, right? And we tell people start there because really that's the personality of the character. Like that comes out, it's like, oh yeah, you're a coward, or you're curious, or you're bloodthirsty, or whatever. And like it gives you something to latch on to and really play at the table.
Okay. So let's see. So then you've got this epic, saga plot point campaign.
It's a plot point campaign. I don't want anyone to get the idea that it's not plot point campaign.
No, it's an epic plot point campaign.
It's pretty epic, let me tell you. And the cool thing is there's a lot of choice in it, not only in how you handle certain things, because you can fight, but in some cases you can talk. In some cases, you can try and recruit an army and let the army do your fighting for you. And Savage Worlds has a lot of options that make that really fun, but you don't have to. Like there's a lot of different approaches, and the state of the world is going to be very, very different at the end of the game, depending on how you do things. Because we're like, hey, by the end of this, the Empire might be dead. We could be in warlords. You could be on the run. You could be fugitives. You might be the heroes that everyone adores. I don't know. Like, let's see where it goes from here, right?
Okay. So so what you're saying, you've designed this to be like, obviously it is it is a campaign setting. So, but you've got the story, but then you've designed things so that people can keep playing it.
Oh yeah.
After the campaign is done.
Yeah. If you're weird and don't want to play the plot point, there's an adventure generator, and you could either run the Savage Tales solo, like without a campaign around them. You could use the adventure generator to get your own ideas, or if you've seen a million movies and read a million books and just want to do that, like we've got the fodder for it, like it's there. And then if you play the campaign, what's cool is like all of that can be part of it. Like it can extend it or mutate it. Whereas like, all right, we're going to take time to go over here. And as you travel across land, like you're pulling cards to see if things happen. And depending on the card that you pull, you're going to those tables, and it's going to generate. It's like, oh yeah, we found a town and they're having like an A-team style problem, right? Like there's, like we can help these people and maybe gain an advance or maybe gain a reward for doing it, or we can make the choice. Sorry, we've got business and we've got to leave this behind, and literally go, we leave a wake of destruction instead. It's your choice, right?
Okay. So then, I guess another question would be, what sets or say you're a brand new player, like like we mentioned in the beginning, there's kind of been an upheaval in the role-playing space.
Brought a lot of interest to a lot of games, and that's a good thing for everybody in a lot of ways. Yeah.
And so say you're brand new to this. You've only ever played Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah.
You know, what sets this apart besides just the setting? So say you're a new player, you haven't ever done anything like this before.
Yes.
Why would you get into Ghost Mountain as opposed to, say, I'll even throw this out there, maybe Shane will be a little grumpy. Why would you get into Ghost Mountain over Deadlands?
Right. Well, so I mean, Deadlands 2, right? Like any of the Savage Worlds ones, like our tagline is fast, furious, and fun. Like that's what they're designed to do. We're going to throw you into the action. We're going to give you a lot of options, and we're going to let you play. Like you've got a job, do it however you want to do it, and let the chips fall where they may. And with Ghost Mountain, it's like, do you want to do that job with magic and martial arts, or would you rather do it with six guns and mad science? Deadlands, right? Like
right.
Or we invite you to try both and make your own choice there. Yeah.
Right, but I want you to sell Ghost Mountain.
Yeah. So Ghost Mountain is like, it's going to be like, it's the premier martial arts setting. Like if you want to use those kinds of moves, and bring in the magic, and also tell epic stories that might have a little bit more emotion to them, because not all of the ghosts that you're battling are evil. Some of them just have problems to solve. And, like if one of the examples, right, is it's the ghost of a woman who's been murdered, and she is lingering, and she's a sorrowful spirit, and she's making trouble and like harming people in this household, but she's doing it to save them from the murderer. So if you just go in and don't like investigate and beat her up, someone else is going to die and you're going to have another ghost to deal with. But if you talk to people, if you role play, like if you get into it, you'll find those extra things, and maybe you can bring the culprit to justice, and that will satisfy the ghost and she'll go on. Those are the kind of choices that we want to give you. And if you want to just do kung fu fights, awesome. We got you covered, right? If you want to go deeper, that layer is there for you too.
Okay. That's actually really cool that you mentioned that. So one thing I always talk about when I'm doing my reviews and and looking at different things is the story. I mean, obviously you've put this grand story together, but I like that you mentioned the ghost of the murdered woman,
of one woman, right?
Yeah, because it to me that's saying there are more stories here that you can tell, even if it's something as simple like one murdered woman isn't an epic plot point campaign,
right?
But
it is a savage tale,
right? It could be it could be this fantastic story, like let's be honest, a traditional dungeon crawl is go in, beat up the ghost, and everything's fine.
Right.
But
that's not how we roll.
No, but I like that. I like that there's more depth to this than just here's this epic story. I mean,
or there's the option for depth, right? Like, because there's nothing wrong with a good action set piece. And if people want to play like that, awesome, right? Like, we've got monsters for you. We've got them. Like, there's demons. There's some clear bad guys for you to beat up. Absolutely.
I mean, I hear
also gray areas.
I hear there's a dragon in it too.
There's a dragon in it. So this is one of those things that like only Shane can do, right? Like the rest of us are like, no way, I would never pitch this in a million years, right? And one of the challenges in the setting, like, is, and in his imagination, when he had the original cover commissioned, it's got this horrible undead dragon, over the gate to hell. Like, that's kind of their monstrous foe. And in the genre itself, dragons are usually a good thing, right? They are creatures of luck and water, and like when you see a dragon, you're like, oh, shoo, like hooray,
Right.
There are evil examples, but generally they're not treated that same way. So part of the story challenge was like, oh, okay, how do we make this absolutely an evil dragon? Remember, I mentioned like spirits are one thing and bodies are another, and this dragon gets killed and its body rises as one of these undead. So it's not just a dragon, it's an undead, angry body of a dragon, right? And maybe there's even more to it than that, which connects to the whole story, right? So like it became this big villain, and we've got like this art for it. And Chen's like, yeah, that's really cool. We should do a miniature for that. And I was like, and this is actually like pretty near to when we were going to relaunch. And we're like, what now? And Simon Lucas, who's all like the president and production manager, and is just brilliant, right? It's just like you can see his soul leaving his body. He's like, I'll try. So we go out, we commission it, we get a fantastic sculptor who's super fast. We get it put together. We get like the pieces came together. We're like, wait, we can actually do this. And this is not something we've done for the other lines. Like we tend to not do miniatures, but
I would say lots of pawns, lots of tokens.
Yes,
but nothing.
But also this guy, right? He's special. Is the idea, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, as I've got the picture up here, so this is like this is the full collection of Ghost Mountain. So how involved were you in this, or did you just do the writing side of it?
I did all of the art orders. I did all of the writing. I did the layout. I mean, so Carl Kiesler created the layout, like great guy. And he does a lot of our layout stuff, but like I put everything in it. Jess Rogers takes the art that we did and makes those pawn sheets out of it. But, and then Simon's the guy that's got to go get the dice made and, and all that. And Alita, is our art director. And she's, getting the people that make the maps, and then we, and I give them like, here's my idea for it, like a thumbnail sketch of what it should be and the elements that it should have. And then all of this stuff comes back like 10 times better than what I thought it, like what I imagined it. It's like, oh, wow, yeah, that's why you're the artist. Like, this is way better than what I would have done.
Well, and what I mean is, so everything that's going to be in this box, like outside of the miniature, was your idea. You're like, we should add this in for it's a combination of it's a team effort. Right? Okay.
Like my fingerprints are smudged all over everything, right? But it is a team effort. It will be Shane saying, let's do a dragon, and Simon saying, hey, we've got this option to make the map cloth. Wouldn't that be cool? Right. It's like, man, that would be cool. Or Don Shepis going, hey, what I really want is a playmat that helps me do the mass battles because they're a big potential element of this story. It's like, that's a really cool idea, right? Like, so like everyone's got their contribution, that adds to it. The team's stronger, but yeah, like I'm on a lot of this.
No, that's like I like. So that's the other thing is like I like the games, but I also really like the business side. Understanding why do we put these into it?
Yeah. Well, and on every single piece that we do, there's something that somebody wanted, and some of them came around where like I'm running this at conventions, and I'm like, really, what I want is this.
Okay.
Like our archetype cards are made a specific way, kind of based on the Rifts ones, where they open up and they've got picture, backstory, stats, and then the special abilities listed on the back. And one of the things that I wanted, because like I just make them for con games, is a lot of the characters have powers, and we've got power cards that we do, but more than one character might have the same power. So I'm like, I would like each of the characters to have their own power cards come with them.
Okay.
You can do that. Like, we unlocked that really early. Awesome. That's how I run it. Like, that's what I would do with it at the table, right? And we try to be very conscious, because it's always possible, like, hey, here's this box full of amazing things. But if people don't want everything in the box, it's not the good value that we think it is.
Right.
So we try very hard to make sure that every element that we're putting in there is bringing something to the table. And you might not realize that you want it, but hopefully when you get it and play with it, you're like, oh, turns out I didn't know it, but I wanted this. And I'm glad I got the box because it's in here.
Okay. So yeah, and that's actually one thing. You mentioned these archetype cards.
Yeah.
So essentially,
if you're using the archetypes, yeah.
Well, I was going to say, so essentially you can get this box, open it up, and just start playing. You don't even need to make your characters. Absolutely.
Like, so that's the idea, is especially on a genre like this, like, a lot of us are really into it and know exactly what we would do with a character.
Right.
Many people have not experienced Wuxia before. They don't even know where to start. And that was why it was very important for us to start with the archetypes and be like, okay, if you've never read it or seen the movies or the TV shows or whatever, I'm going to get you started.
Okay.
Like, here's what you do, like, to get your feet wet. And these are concepts that everyone can get. Like, he's the big angry guy with an axe. I know what to do with that. She's she's a cowardly rich girl with a bow. Okay, I know what to do with that. This one's a cultist with fire powers that maybe likes using fire a little too much. Okay, I know what to do with that, right? And like, start there, and like, we'll ease you into it. But I always like to joke that Savage Worlds is the game for people that just don't have time to do it the hard way, because right, like, because a lot of games, like, oh, once I do my 3 hours of prep, it's fine. I was like, I don't have 3 hours to prep this, but I can crack it open. Chapter 1, I've got the pawns for the figures right here. I don't have to paint anything. I tend to paint figures anyway, but I like having these pawns, and I'll take them to conventions for sure. Here's the map. I'll put it out. Here's the stuff. We've got everything we need. Let's just play. Like, let's just play and have fun.
Okay. So then, and another thing that you mentioned that, again, because I don't really run with a list of prepared questions. Probably should. So you mentioned, so typically a role-playing game, it's each player is taking on like one role, their character,
yes,
and just going on their little adventure. But you mentioned mass battles.
Yeah, well, and so this is something that Savage Worlds has always brought to the table, and it's one of the things that it does, I think, better than any system I've ever seen, is you can pick up followers as you go, and they're extras, right? But they'll act like on your turn. They do things, and they're simple enough that it doesn't slow down gameplay, and like, you can kind of build up this little entourage, and then the level beyond that is mass battles. And Savage Worlds has layers, right? There's the initial layer is very simple, very narrative, and hopefully doesn't scare anyone away, right? But once you're good with that, you can go deeper. Like, all right, let's get a little bit deeper into some of these combat options that I was talking about. All right, cool. Now let's go even deeper. Dramatic tasks and quick encounters start coming up. And one of the ones that new people haven't interfaced with as much is the mass battle rules, but it's there when you need it. And we kind of leverage it there, where there's certain points where, like, this is a siege on a town. 5 people aren't going to be able to beat a whole army. So you got to play out that story that you would see in the movies. Like, all right, let's get our guys together. Let's make our battle plan, and let's play this out. And those mass battle rules help that play out in a satisfying way. And during the battle, each character can be like, okay, I'm going out in the field, and it's risky, right? Like, no matter how powerful you are, you could get seriously hurt doing that, but you could generate a bonus that shifts the battle that turn, and these kind of go back and forth, and it's super fun at the table, like as these things start stacking up, and then you hit that climax where one side breaks. And the other interesting thing is, because we're doing it that way, it's not scripted who wins the fight, right? So it's like, look, this town could fall. Here are the things that happen if it does.
Okay.
You could, like, the Empire could fumble here. All right, bad guys win. Here's where to go from there. You know, like there's still a game, but it's going to change some things.
So,
and, like, that's a fun variation. You know?
So, quote unquote, failure is written into the story. Then
it is. It's totally an option. Absolutely.
Okay. Yeah, I mean,
and you can choose not to engage at all. You can be like, yeah, those guys, they're on their own. Bye.
Yeah,
I don't do mass battles, man.
Well, no, and I think that's actually kind of interesting, because typically, like, when you see a pre-published adventure, it's okay. This is it. Like, especially nowadays, they usually seem much more scripted. Like the players are just there to move that story along, but it's always going to end the same way.
It can be, right? Yeah, like that's one way to do it. It's a safer way to do it, right? It's like, hey, look, we're going to get to an epic conclusion. It's going to happen. Everyone's going to be satisfied by that. I get it. I tend to like, and this is what plot points do, right? Is at almost every juncture, it's like, well, this could go a different way. And it's like, well, you're still going to get to chapter 3, but conditions may have changed dramatically, and how you get to chapter 3 can change radically. Like, we had to go the long way around, or, you know, people died in the meantime, or we're not fighting for the same thing anymore by the time we reach it. That's interesting to me.
Yeah, and so that actually brings up a question. So how do you as a writer plan for that? Because if you're going over, say, 10 chapters, and you're trying to work in these failure points where okay, in this chapter they didn't save the town, or they didn't stop the murderer, but then, and part of it is you kind of write as if they're succeeding, but then you look at it and go like, all right, like they could lose, like this could lose, you know, or you do some play testing and they surprise you and you're like, oh my God, I need a trapdoor here that I didn't think I needed. And like, that's the fun part, right? Like, that's the fun of playing, but also after 30 years of playing, like, you get a feeling for like, hey, this one's hard. They might blow it, or it's Savage World, a couple of fumbles, and this could ruin everyone's day. I need to be sure, because this has happened to me. How do you handle that? Yeah. I was going to say, and so how do you kind of plan, 3 or 4 chapters down the road,
and part of it
failure points?
It is one part of it is the high points in those plot points are areas that you can reach even if the previous ones fail.
Okay.
It just changes the conditions of how you get there. Like, for example, if that town falls, you're going to have fewer troops to be able to recruit later in the game, and you're not going to, it's costing you time because you got to go around it or whatever, but you can still go around it,
Okay.
And you might eventually take time and be like, all right, can we fix this later? Can we recruit different guys to take this? Probably not, but also in the meantime, if you didn't even fight there, you've gained time. Maybe you can save a different spot that's going to give you a different route to go through. So, and this is what I learned from 50 Fathoms that was so game changing, was having that map there that says, here's where these places are and how they relate to each other, which gives you that idea of there is somewhere else to go. What happens if they go here? Okay, cool. Like, once those options exist, once you've thought through them, or like, yeah, nothing happens when you go here, but roll the adventure generator, okay, awesome. Like, that's an option too,
Awesome. So then, so you mentioned that you've played through like 50 Fathoms multiple times.
It's so good.
So is that as a player, or is that as a game master?
I game mastered it 3 times. I've never got to play it, actually. I want to.
Okay. Was that with the same group, or was that with different
groups every time?
Okay.
Different groups every time.
Got it. Okay,
And
so as a
results
game
were wildly different.
So then like so as a game master, obviously it's a little easier to run it differently each time. What is it that
But the great thing is it's the players that get to make those calls, right? Like I
Mhm.
don't have to choose to do anything different. Like I put the options in front of them. Like in 50 Fathoms, like a trade war starts between Spanish galleons and English galleons. And maybe you've been working with the English or maybe you've been working with the Spanish up until then. Maybe one side hates you. If you're pirates, the English probably hate you. So you're like, whichever one you back is okay. Like you might win, you might lose, but later on when you're going to recruit ships, that's going to make a difference who's around to recruit or how they feel about you, right? So that's like an example of it can play out in very different ways, but you do get to the same point eventually.
Okay.
The antecedents are different, but they're variables that change. But in the story, well, we still got to recruit unless we're dead. Some people go do this thing, right? Like, well, who are we recruiting? Well, we're good friends with the pirates and the Spanish. British aren't too happy with us this time. Okay, that tells us how this is going down.
Okay. Then let's see. I'm trying to think if because you mentioned that there's an adventure generator.
And there's a lot of different factions in the world that you can support, like politically. And this is one of the fun things too, is like there's that social element. So in the middle of the plot point campaign, you've got to go make your case to the emperor in the capital. And this is one of those fail points, right? Where it's like, look, it's all going to come down to a social conflict where you're arguing, yeah, you need to give us the army, give us your support rather than hamstringing us like you have been so far. And there's all these evil forces like pushing him the other direction. And you can kind of confront them directly and all that. But if it comes to a fight, okay, you're going to have to fight your way out of the capital. There are people that are going to come after you. And it's like, maybe you win that argument. Okay, cool. Now you've got Imperial assets. And here's how that plays out for the next thing. Maybe you lose that argument. Okay, here's where you can run to. And you're actually going to go to the same place that you would go if you won the argument, but you're going there as fugitives with people hunting you rather than going at the head of a column of troops with magic items, Like it can go either way. And you might also decide, I don't like this guy. I don't want him to be on our side, right? Like we're going to take him out. Like this is going to be our empire at the end of it. All options,
Okay. Well, I honestly, for me, I'm really excited. I think your enthusiasm for the project absolutely comes through. And
I do love this stuff. I love
it. So for everyone watching, there is a link down below to the Kickstarter. If you want to see more, there's video, there's lots of information. I also linked over to the Pinnacle YouTube channel. They've got a few different videos where Darrell will go in depth as far as like how the adventure generator works. Don and I rolled up an adventure together.
And
I watched all of those getting ready for this, and I feel like I didn't touch on them anywhere near enough. But obviously go check those out. But I think we have kind of reached a nice stopping point. Also, I have to go get ready for a regular job now. But and we'll say our proper goodbyes off stream. But is there anything that you want to, beside, well, in addition to the Kickstarter, any last points you want to make? Any sales pitch for?
Yeah, well, one of the things that we were talking about before was Savage Worlds, and getting into it, and like I kind of want to reinforce that it's got layers, right? And in the Suede book, like the first chapter with the deals with rules is pretty thin. And honestly, people, like that's all you need for a fast, light narrative game. And all of the other elements are options after that you can add or forget. And we kind of want to reinforce like play as deep as you want, but there's a very light, easy option to start with. I absolutely recommend is still fast, furious, and fun. But when you're ready for that depth and you really want to be like, okay, this is a thing, like this battle is a thing, let's crack open mass battles and see how it works. And it just opens up whole new worlds of styles of play. So I just wanted to mention that because I have written game systems more than one.
We've talked about it.
Yeah, right. But I still prefer Savage Worlds. Like that's my go-to. Like if I'm just fooling around for fun, Savage Worlds is where it's at. So strongly recommend. Check it out. If you've been looking at other game systems, give it a try. Like a lot of game systems, it does stuff differently. But once you get over that system shock of what cards, what, exploding dice, huh? Man, like you start seeing what it can do and why, like it's the system that so many of us turn to when we don't have a ton of time to prepare.
Okay. Well then, yeah. So at this point, seriously, Darrell, thank you so much for coming on. It's been an absolute blast.
Thanks for having me. Let me talk about my stuff.
No, absolutely. And honestly, anytime you do want to pitch something, talk about something, like I'm starting to get in the rhythm where these Thursday night interviews are a regular thing, but I also want to do just like hangouts and bring people on and talk about what's happening in gaming and things like that. So
yeah, and I'd love to answer people's questions and things like that. Like, call me. Like, it's cool.
Yeah, the chat has been a little slow tonight, so that's I think I need to be better about asking or telling people to ask questions, but that's
February, man. What can you do?
Right. Exactly. So, but seriously, everybody, if you enjoyed the video, please do hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, all of the fun YouTube things. But thank you so much, everybody, for being here. And again, I'd like to thank Darrell, and yeah, I'm gonna stop rambling because I have a tendency to do that. But everybody, thank you so much, and we will talk to you next time.
Thank you.
Bye.